Good afternoon, adult educators. Today I'm going to explain the new path to request accommodations. Basically, the process begins the same way that it did before, in the student's GED account. If the student does not already have a GED account, they will need to create one. They'll need to enter their basic demographic information, answer all required questions, and then they will be presented with the following paragraph that explains what testing with accommodations means. If the student says yes and then clicks on the Continue button, they will then see the following screen. In the lower left-hand corner, you will notice it says Complete your accommodations request. You requested special testing accommodations. You must submit a few documents to be approved for this. Once the student clicks on the My Accommodations button, they will then see the following screen. What it does is it gives the students a high-level overview of what the accommodations process is like. It states that they will need to create an account on the GED Accommodations Request system, that they will need to submit documentation from a certified professional, and that they will need to wait for a determination to be made by the GED Accommodations team. If the student clicks on Yes, Continue with my request, and then clicks on the Continue button down below, they will then be taken to the GED Accommodations Request system. The next page they see will look like this, and they will need to click on the Register link. The student will then need to create an account in the GED Accommodations Request system. So they will need to enter their first and last name, their email address twice, and whatever they would like their password to be twice. Please note that students can use the same password that they use for their GED account if they'd like. They will also need to enter their birth date and their street address and their phone number. Notice that there are 3 boxes at the bottom of the screen. If the student is under 18 or has a legal guardian, they will need to put a check mark in the first box. All students will have to put a check mark in the second and third box to indicate that they do agree with the Pearson VUE Terms of Service and the GED Accommodations Request System's Terms of Service as well. Once the student clicks on Continue, they will be taken to the GED Accommodations Request System's dashboard. They'll need to click on Start Your Request here. Once they do that, they will see GED listed on the screen. And so they need to confirm that, yes, indeed, they would like to take the GED test with accommodations. To confirm, they'll need to click on Continue. Next, they will see GED listed on the screen again. Basically, what we're asking for is the student to confirm that, yes, they would like to take the GED test with accommodations. Note, the individual tests will not be listed, just GED. Once the student clicks on Continue, they will then be presented with this screen. They will need to enter 3 pieces of information here. Where it says Request Type, they will need to click on the drop-down arrow to choose their disability category. Over here, where it says Request Item, they will need to click on the drop-down arrow to indicate their request. Is it for a reader, a separate room, extra time? If it is extra time, how much extra time are they looking for? 25%, 50%, or 100% extra time? And in the box, they will need to give a reason as to why it is they are requesting the type of accommodation that they are. Here's an example of what a student could choose. On this screen, I've chosen Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. For request item, I've chosen extra time, specifically 50%. And my reason is I would like more time because it's hard for me to focus. The accommodations team is aware that some students would like to make more than one type of accommodation request, and they are more than welcome to do so. The student would need to click on the plus sign button to list their additional requests. Once the student clicks on the Continue button that is over here, they'll be taken to Step 4. Note this step is not mandatory. If the student would like the accommodations team to speak to them and them alone, then they should click on Continue to go to Step 5. But if the student would prefer that the accommodations team speak to somebody else on their behalf, like a mentor, a sibling, or a parent, then they should list that person's name and email address here, as well as their phone number. They'll need to indicate the relationship with this person. And note that the authorization is valid for a maximum of 1 year. And students can list more than one contact person here. To do so, they would just need to click on the plus sign button that's here. When you click Continue, they'll be taken to step 5. Because I chose Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder as my disability category a few steps ago, that's why it's listed here. There's 3 questions that all students will be presented with. Was the documentation completed within the last 3 years? Was the documentation completed by a professional qualified to diagnose attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? And does your documentation contain a clear diagnosis and discuss the impacts of ADHD on your performance? After answering these 3 questions and then clicking on Continue, the student will be presented with step 6. This deals with documentation. To upload their documents, students will need to click on the Upload icon. If they have more than one document that they would like to upload, they will need to submit those documents, the additional ones, by clicking on the Upload Additional Documents button. For any students that wish to fax in their documentation instead of uploading it, they can do that. To find out instructions on how to do that, they just need to click on the magnifying glass icon. And note, students can send a message to the accommodations team. If them or the person who is helping them with this accommodations request has any questions for the accommodations team, they can ask those questions by clicking on that Send Message button. Here you can see a document has been uploaded. The name of it is listed here, and there's a check mark to indicate that the document has been successfully uploaded. What's important is that after students upload their documents, that they click on the Submit button, because this is what will send the request over to the accommodations team. Next, let's take a look at key terminology. Here are some terms that you should be familiar with. Initiated means that the student has said yes to the accommodations question in their GED.com account, but they have not done anything else yet. In progress means that the student has navigated to the GED accommodation system. They created an account, but they have not yet submitted any documentation. In review means that the student has submitted documentation and they are waiting for a determination to be made by the GED accommodations team. Incomplete means that the student has insufficient documentation. Approved means that the student was approved by the accommodations team. Not approved means that the accommodations team has said no to a particular request, but that status could change. And canceled means that the student has opted to abandon the request process. Next, let's take a look at sample communications. This is an example of the email students will receive after they submit their documentation. It states, "Your request and supporting documentation have been successfully submitted for review. Please allow up to 30 calendar days for a determination. An email will be sent to this address once a determination has been made, and you may review the status of your request at any time by returning to the request system." Once the student clicks on the link, they'll be taken to the login page of the GED Accommodations Request system. Here's an example of an email that students will receive after a change has been made to their status. It simply says, "There has been a status change to your accommodations request." You click on this link, they'll be able to retrieve their message. What I have here is an example of a partial approval letter. If you take a look at where the blue arrows are pointing to, they're pointing to the request made by the student. The student is requesting 25% extra time and a reader. If you look at the red circles, that indicates the decision made by the accommodations team. The accommodations team has approved the request for 25% extra time. The green arrow indicates how long the student can test with 25% extra time. They have until August 29th of 2017. Down here, the accommodations team is saying that they've concluded that additional documentation is needed before they can reach a decision on the student's request for a reader. And in the yellow rectangle, the accommodations team goes further to state that they have no evidence right now that the student is unable to read on their own. And below that, the student would see this paragraph, which is basically the accommodations team letting the student know that they are free to share this letter with their doctor, with their physician, as a means to assist them both in compiling the necessary supporting documentation that the student would need to submit to the accommodations team. What we have here is an example of an incomplete determination letter. This student requested 100% extra time. The accommodations team said, we have concluded that additional documentation is needed before we can reach a decision on the following. And down below, they get more specific and they say, we cannot determine current functional limitations and need for accommodations without current information. So based on what's stated, we can see that the student did submit documentation, but what they submitted was not current. Again, down below, the accommodations team is letting the student know that they are welcome to share this letter with their doctor or physician so that they can both work together to compile the necessary supporting documentation. Here's an example of somebody who has not been approved. The request is that they wanted a reader. Accommodations does say accommodations not approved, and the reason specifically is we have no evidence that you are unable to read on your own. Note that down below, the accommodations team does point out to the students that they could request an appeal, and if they would like to do so, they should click on the Request an Appeal button that is in their account. The last communication that I wanted to show you is an example of an email that is sent to testers who fax in documentation. It states, your request for accommodations on the GED test has been successfully submitted for review. Please allow up to 30 days for determination. If additional information is needed, our team will contact you. An email will be sent to this address once a determination has been made. Now let's take a look at how students can check on the status of their request. Like I indicated a few minutes ago, when students get emails from the accommodations team, the link for the GED Accommodations system will be in that email. When the student clicks on it, they will then see this page. And in the student's GED.com account, there will be a link to get to this page. To get into the system, the student will need to enter their email address and their password and then click Sign In. Once they do that, they will be presented with the dashboard. Here we have an example of somebody who has started 5 accommodations requests. To the left, you can see in the status column there are a few different symbols. All the student would have to do is to hover over their symbols to get an explanation as to what the symbols mean. If they were to see an exclamation mark, it would mean that their request is in progress, which means that the student has started the accommodation request, but they haven't completed it. They have not submitted their documentation. In review means that the student has submitted their documentation, they're waiting for a response from the accommodations team, and the X means that the student has canceled their request. Next, how can students edit their GED Accommodations profile and change their password? To do so, the student will see a link on the GED Accommodations Dashboard in the lower left-hand corner. They'll see 2, one to edit their profile, one to change their password. If they click on Edit Profile, they will then see a page that looks like this. If they would like to delete any of the information that's here, their email address, their phone number, or address, they would do so by clicking on the trash can symbol. If they would like to add an email, phone number, or address, they would click on the plus sign symbol. And note the student will have to click on Continue to save the recent changes that they've made, and a student can list more than one email, more than one phone number, and more than one address in their account. To change their password, once they click on the Change Password link, they would enter their old password once, enter their new password twice, and then click on the Save button. What I'd like to show you next is the updated GED Accommodations page. It looks very similar to the way that it did before, but what we've done is we have added a step-by-step instructions, a how-to document for the students. On how to apply for accommodations, and it takes them through the entire process. It's a 15-page document. It's in color. It lists the steps, plus there are screenshots to help the student and or whoever is assisting them with this accommodations request through this new process. So if the student clicks here, they'll see that document, or if you were to click here on how do I apply for accommodations, the document will then be presented to you. The last thing I'd like to mention is, or last thing I would like to do is give you some information about browsers. Which browsers should be used? Testers need to use Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Internet Explorer 11 or higher. They can definitely use mobile browsers for all of the above on your phones, but if they have an older phone, say like a flip phone, they should avoid trying to access the GED Accommodations Request system on their phone. If you or your students have any questions, please feel free to send the accommodations team an email at accommodations@gedtestingservice.com. Thank you for your time and all you do to assist our GED students.